3, 2, 1.
We're back. Shrew Deuce is back on, and we got some stories for you. Today, we're going to talk about a couple cool things. Bears are going nuts. A couple of bear-looking ladies are also coming back. We're going to cover on Twitter, and a couple other Twitter stories that are very interesting. We got to show you this. We're also going to talk about Elon Musk is going after the ADL because they're jerks. A couple of American stories about a couple of crazy things that are happening to far too many people. We live in a police state, people. It is nasty, and it is getting worse by the day. And then also in America, we're also getting the propaganda machine is back. They're going to launch us back into mask wearing. They're going to launch us back into vaccines. Don't fall for it, people. We are smarter than this. We can overcome. And finally, some Canadian stories. We got the trial of Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, as well as some local craziness. I mean, it's happening everywhere, people. So we're going to talk about that and so many more stories today on this week's episode of the Shrew Deuce Podcast.
All right, we are back.
Hey, buddy.
Episode.
Welcome.
Tuesday News Day.
Steven's finally committed back.
Well, now we are back for our regular kind of summer.
Tuesday News Day.
Yeah, our summer period is over, so now we can go into our winter period, which is kind of our normal time.
You're skipping a whole season, you monster.
We're in Canada. Fall doesn't exist.
That's not true. September is basically like Calgary's like third month of summer. It is. It's weird.
Yeah, true enough.
Like June is not that great as far as weather, but September has consistently always been decent weather. If you're lucky, we might be able to hold on to a little bit of extra summer for a couple more weeks, if not the whole month. So let's hope so. That'd be amazing. But man, we're back. You've been away camping, haven't you? How's that been, man?
Facts on fall. It is fall for some people. It's quite a chilly. No, camping with my in-laws is super boring. Hello, Trindada.
Trindada.
You're the one from Brazil, aren't you? Think so. Really certain. So. Yes.
And yet so well.
All right, well, it's good to have you back. Thank you for everybody who is already contributing to the live stream. So yes, camping with my in-laws is awful. It is super duper boring. We did not play any games whatsoever. The only exciting thing we did, we went to the splash park for like 20 minutes and then we went home. And then yesterday we're coming back from the camping trip, and then my in-laws wake us up, open our tent at 6 a.m, and say, "Here are the kids, we're leaving." Because they had taken some of the kids overnight, and I was like, "What?" And I'm like, "I'm cold, and we don't have enough room in our blankets to have all 4 kids, and so I guess we're just gonna start packing up at 6 a.m."
Works.
So yeah, that was awful.
Intensity.
Truly awful. But Danny, how was your weekend? That was long.
I like how you called it that. Board games yesterday, which was awesome. We played like Power Grid. You ever played Power Grid before?
Yes. We played it.
Yes.
The only time I've ever played it was a 3-way tie between you, me, and Chad.
Yep, that was pretty epic. But we played it yesterday, and Chad, of course, ran away with it, being Chad. We also played Machikoro, which is another game that we've played before.
Yeah, I like Machikoro quite a bit.
Machikoro was pretty decent. And then Saturday, Sunday, I took my mom to like this very like cool like restaurant downtown. It was great. It was surprisingly good for like the food that they had. Like it's Halifax style kind of Canadian fare. So like they had like a lot of poutine. They had like all sorts of like new takes on sandwiches. She had lobster sandwiches, which were really good. So yeah, pretty decent. It was downtown. And apparently they're building a new location right by her house, so she is super excited. And I'm pretty excited because I'm like, yeah, we get to go there more often. So yeah, it's gonna be good, man.
Sweet.
It's gonna be good. So are you ready to go, man?
Yeah, let's kind of jump into the stories of the day because
gotta get in this.
It's gonna be an interesting one, that's for sure. So let's open up with some craziness.
Little craziness.
So, from the Daily Mail. Fearless Pennsylvania man herds a bear out of his campground even as he's blooded by a swipe from the massive wild animal. A video uploaded today showed the dramatic moment a bear swiped a man. The brave man, Mike, was ushering a wild animal of his campsite when it attacked. So
I don't know if it's called brave or stupid. I would kind of venture on, but a little bit of both.
Well, it depends. Like, okay, if he's by himself, well, okay,
look at him.
He is trying to usher it away from his family, so I'd call that brave.
Sure. Well, there's brave, and then there's like stupid in how you do it. Execution, bro.
Yeah.
You don't walk right next to the bear.
Yeah, he's being way too calm about this.
Yes.
He's walking as though it's just like, come on, man. And then he's turning his back to the bear.
And then
he's standing in his way.
And of course the bear's like, yeah. Oh, there he goes.
You don't command a bear like a dog.
He's not a chihuahua, man. That is not a chihuahua. That is a freaking bear. It's a big bear, too.
Yeah. This is where the right to bear arms is important. Oh, yes, I'm going to shut my tiny gates.
Oh, my God.
You got a nice claw? Have you seen the bear claw? Have you seen, like, the actual claw from the bear?
Oh, my God, from the bear.
Yeah. He's got sliced up good.
Yeah.
Dang, this guy.
Yeah, that's
I've seen a lot of bear encounters.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people who do some very, very silly things because I used to think, okay, maybe there's ways you can handle a bear when it comes around, thinking like, okay, there's like when you actually when I saw the scene from the movie The Revenant.
Mm-hmm.
You ever seen The Revenant?
I've seen bits and pieces of it. I haven't seen the whole movie.
What's his name?
Leonardo
DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio. No, that was The Gray with Liam Neeson.
Yeah, you're thinking of The Gray.
Yeah.
The Revenant is where he basically fights a bear.
Yes.
I stopped having any illusions that I could ever take on a bear in any way if I ever encountered one. Because bears are terrifying. It was like the most terrifying scene. But even black bears, like if you actually see the claws that these things have, like those are razor sharp, and they could easily kill you if they wanted to. It is incredibly dangerous to be that close to a bear and to treat it like another dog down the street. I'm like, dude, that is not smart. Like, sure, you can usher it towards an area, but you still got to be careful because this is still a dangerous animal. Like, it's crazy, but I don't know. Some people, those Americans, I tell you, even like walks off. He's like, "Oh, just a little scratch on my side." I'm like, "Yeah, you're lucky. That's all it was."
Yeah. Well, like I understand, of course, that a black bear is much smaller than a grizzly bear, but it can still do a ton of damage.
If that bear got aggressive, like actually felt threatened, and went after the guy, that would have turned out very differently. Like the guy's lucky that the bear was not in an adversarial kind of mood, because if it was. It would have been really much worse. That could have been 10 times worse. Yeah. Imagine Trudeau could have taken that bear. actually, I would literally pay money. Like, can we set up like Trudeau wrestling a bear? I would totally get him a polar bear.
I'd give him some advantage and give him some armor.
That's no armor. He gets a stick. He gets a stick. That's all he gets, and it has that stick has to be made of paper. It's a paper straw, oversized paper straw.
It's a paper
That's his only weapon. That's it.
This is what you've done to us, and now we return it back to you.
That's right. That's called a cruel irony.
Just his kayak paddle.
That's all he gets. That's
all right. Well, continuing the hilarity
speaking of bears,
yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, bears.
Okay, let's not. I don't think I can last any more than like 10 seconds in this video, just because it's.
I showed this to Steven. He was like,
anything at all, really. And I think that's
full
kind
screen,
of the appeal. So
that's not the appeal.
Okay, since I get the same questions every day about my body hair, I'm going to answer some of them. The first one is, how do I wash it? Literally just like how anyone would wash their body.
How does the man wash their hair?
Everywhere else. So if you've ever seen a man in the shower, just like that. I just like get in there with my fingernails and so.
Ugh, no. No.
It looks if you covered her entire head, you would think that's a man, like with
Yep.
the amount of hair that she has.
And
you're
boobs,
like,
but yeah.
no. It's like, no. Here's the question. Do you think that the fact that we don't find that attractive in women, is that social or is that like natural? Like that men are just not naturally attracted to women with hair? Do you think
I think that has more of a social element, just because, like shaving as an element of shaving body hair as an element of grooming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not aware of it being like a massive historical thing.
No, even in Bible, which is ancient, Song of Solomon, the women actually still kept their hair short. They didn't Yeah, so it's not something that's like just a modern thing. It's like, no, like for the most part, historically, that was not the norm. And the reason is because I'll give you the best example of why this is normal. Men naturally have facial hair and women don't.
Yep.
So men is normally it's attractive to see a man with beards because that's something that men can grow, right?
Yeah.
And women can't. This is also why women grow long hair because, believe it or not, women's hair grows faster and more thick than men's hair, which is why, like, the glory of women is their long hair. That's also the reason why they shave, or at least like trim hair around them, because guess what? Not only is it attractive to see a woman without a beard, it's also attractive to see a woman without a beard anywhere else on their person. You know, oh my goodness. Like,
all right,
Leroy was the last person alive, and that woman was like the last woman alive. But like, well, that's it. The human race is doomed.
I guess
It's that. Nope, not happening. Nope, not happening.
The human race is over. We will not.
It's over. We've basically we've
all right.
ruined
Well,
it
then let's
forever.
look at the other opposite end of the spectrum of, like trying to be too appealing.
Women who are showing too much.
Too much. Okay. So.
But I'm here at school because I got it.
I'm asking you as your mother, see you leave out the house like that. Because at this point, that's who I'm going to call. Your mother.
Call her. She's not going to answer.
Well, somebody's going to have to come get you because you cannot be at school like this.
Why?
Because it's inappropriate.
What's inappropriate?
Everything you have on.
Everything
you have on is inappropriate.
You're wearing a bikini.
Everything you have on is inappropriate.
It's a hot mess.
Clothes on. I got top and bottom.
Top and bottom. You thought you was going to come to school.
I thought I was going to come to
your
school,
mother
learn a lesson in my top and my bottom, and then let's learn a lesson.
No, you ain't gonna learn a lesson in my class. The lesson is to put clothes on in the morning when you come into school. That's your lesson.
Am I still going to be doing my presentation? Because this is easy.
Yeah, after I get her up and out my class, we will go ahead and finish what we learned.
I came into school with my bag with everything ready to learn. I sat down front and center, ready to learn, and then you made a moment.
No,
me.
Oh, this is the teacher's fault.
You caused the scene in my class. Y'all all came here to learn, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm here to learn
Would your mother let you walk out the house with something like this on?
No.
I don't care what she's wearing. I just want to do my presentation.
I just want to
And now I'm running out of time to do it. Can I just do the
No.
You can't do your
Can you
presentation.
just put on like
until
gym clothes so we can get on with this? Like, just put on some gym clothes or something.
This is clothes.
Yeah, I can give you my hood. Would that help?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like, and I was commenting because of course, like, working on campus, and this is only a little more, a little less revealing, or a little more revealing than what some students wear. Yes, something tells me in the near future she'll be brought on stage as Cinnamon or Portia. I don't doubt it, especially considering the whole comments of like, call my mother, be like, she won't answer, and it's like, that's a problem.
That's a big problem. The fact this is why she's wearing like basically a bikini at school. Okay, Steven, have you ever seen? You know what this reminds me of? Have you ever seen that college humor sketch called "The Problem with Jeggings"?
I was just about to mention that one.
Look it up on YouTube. Just do a quick scene from that. That is what this makes me think of.
Oh,
That's
so
exactly
much.
what this makes me. So if anybody's not familiar, we're going to show in a second here. basically that College Humor did a sketch, and like this is the live action. It's called The Problem with Jeggings, but yeah, you can skip forward I think a little bit, but yeah. Basically, it's satire, but we're now seeing it.
This is exactly what it is.
Are those pants you're wearing? What are those?
Stocking khakis.
Yeah, gotcha. They're not allowed.
What about Aaron? He's wearing a hat.
This is a yarmulke?
What about my Yama bra?
Wow! Yeah, no, you're 16. That's definitely sacrilegious.
So I'm gonna bet I can't wear my nert.
What?
My not a shirt.
Okay, that's just not wearing a shirt.
Mixed with a shirt.
Okay, you're gonna be suspended.
Swearings.
Sweater earrings, those are absolutely fine, but they look terrible.
Quongs? They're corduroy
Thongs, gotcha. Just keep them underneath your pants.
You old fogey.
Bogey. Wow, haven't heard that word in a long time. I'm 30 though, thanks. Okay, you in the back, what are you wearing? Is that a shirt with the boobs cut out?
It's a W neck.
Take that off!
Fine, but underneath I'm wearing a nerd, you fucking fogey.
Okay, I think you guys think that word is worse than it actually is.
Can I wear this condom?
Not instead of pants.
What?
No.
That's basically the satirical version of
what we just saw. Yeah.
That girl went into class with a bikini. I mean, Steven, do you remember the good old days when shame was a thing and people actually had a little bit of like some level of respect?
Yeah.
Like this girl walks into class with a bikini. It's like, what's wrong with what I'm wearing? I'm like, it's a bikini.
It's a bikini.
That's beachwear, not classroom
If you don't understand that is going to be inherently distracting,
yeah,
then it's like, okay, I don't have words for how ridiculous you look right now. It's like, yes, you've got your points across. You are physically appealing to other men. Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Is that the point you were trying to make? Because you're clearly not here to learn.
Yeah, clearly.
Unless
I love
you're
that.
trying to learn about the sexual behavior of men, which is a whole other thing, and that's not something you should be learning in a class. That's not, like biology.
I'm doing a live social experiment for my psychology class to see if men can concentrate with hot girl, like that.
Yeah.
I love how my niece's school, they have a policy. If a girl shows up and she's violating the dress code, they literally have a giant hoodie that she has to wear.
No, that's the policy in my kid's school too.
It's basically like wearing a sackcloth. I'm like,
they have what is it? It's like this giant weird bright neon. No, it's not a hoodie in my kid's school. It's something really. It's like a track coat from the 80s. That's like bright neon. It's nice. Bright pink and bright orange, and it just looks like So it's like, okay, well, this is your option. It's like you wear that, and you don't want to wear that.
I mean, that's the way to solve it. That little way to solve it. Yeah. And if they're like, I don't want to wear that, I'm like, do you have something else to wear? It's like, no. Well, this is what you're wearing.
No problem.
That's on you.
Yeah. It's like the guy at the end is like, I just want to do my presentation. Like, would it help? Did I give her my hoodie? It's like, yes, it would help if you gave her your hoodie. But
that's right.
Your motivations, it's just like, why are you so I need to do my presentation right now? And it's like, do we?
Yeah, I love how one of the guys actually said, this is just a hot mess. And I'm like, yes, it is.
It is a hot mess.
Yes, it is. It's a very hot mess. But speaking of hot messes, let's talk about what Matt Walsh authorized this week.
Speaking of hot messes, well, good transition.
Thank you. I'm the Seamus of transitions.
Of course. All right, so this is a small clip of this one woman, and this one woman has gone viral over the past few days, just because of how she likes to advertise her life at 29 and single.
4:45 a.m. on a Saturday. I am 29 and single, and I don't have kids yet. Here's what your Saturday morning looks like when you're single at 29 and you don't have a kid running around the house. I didn't rise from my bed until 10:15. Every time I thought, I should probably get up and do something. I thought, why? Nobody's making me. I'm not missing out on anything. I went to Beyonce last night, and I didn't get home until 1 a.m. And I danced and drank my little heart out, and I didn't pay a babysitter to watch my kids as I did that. And I woke up a tad hungover this morning, which is probably why I was in bed for so long. And I was just scrolling on my phone, and I saw a picture of Shakshuka, and I thought, you know what sounds really good? Maybe I'm gonna learn how to make shakshuka today because I have no plans and I don't have kids and I don't have a husband and I don't have errands to run. I can go to the grocery store and learn how to make shakshuka. So that's on my agenda today. Also on my agenda, probably a rewatch of some Real Housewives of New York. I'm also doing a rewatch of Normal People on Hulu, which is really spicy and I highly recommend. Weirdly, I'm into this documentary on Netflix about blue zone countries, so I've got a pretty stacked day. Anyway, I say all this to say, whenever I'm hard on myself about why I'm not married and I don't have kids and I should be further along at 29, almost 30, I wouldn't want to do anything else this Saturday. I know that you can do all these things when you have kids and you're married, and I understand, but the effortlessness and ease of my life, just kind of focusing on myself and the shakshuka I want to make or the Beyonce concert I want to go to really pays off when I'm hard on myself for not being where society tells me I should be in life.
Wow.
Yep.
You know what she sounds like?
Mm-hmm.
She sounds like an incredibly narcissistic, like selfish person.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that married people always say, and particularly the actual legitimately decent, legitimately decent people, is that when you get married, you learn to stop being selfish. And it's like life isn't about you.
Mm-hmm.
You suddenly have other people to take care of.
That you actually have to prioritize. Yeah.
You become a better person because you're thinking primarily about yourself. Even in the Bible, like for us that are Christian, in the Bible, like the apostle, like one of the writers of the Bible, Paul, said that if you're not married, great. Then you can use your life to serve a greater purpose and commit most of your time to that. She's not doing that. She's like, oh, what's the higher purpose? Like all this extra free time. How can I use it for the greater good? Oh, I'm gonna make shakshuka for myself because I'm self-centered and my whole world's around like revolves around me. These are not the kind of people that create a healthy society.
They're not the kind of people that create a healthy society, and they're not desirable people either. Like,
not at all.
It's one thing. Like if she was like, okay, yes, I'm 29 and single, and I'm trying to yes, I don't have the burdens of family life, and I'm trying to use the spare time that I have, and I'm trying to make my life better. I'm trying to make other people's lives better. But everything that she's saying is no. Like, people tell me that I should be further along in my life goals, and I'm just like, whatever. I appease myself, and I am my God. Yeah, she's on TikTok. Being a narcissist kind of goes with the territory. We did have a Shrewd Dudes podcast TikTok element. It got shut down.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a given. TikTok's the most censorious of all the platforms. Like, you're not going to last long there.
Way to miss that song. Yeah. It was actually funny. I did not know until I watched Michael Knowles' take on this, what shakshuka was.
It's the kind of Chinese or Asian cuisine.
No, it's Italian.
Really?
Yes.
That would not be my first guess.
Oh, I know. It is a poached egg. It is an egg poached in spaghetti sauce.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like an Italian word.
It doesn't sound like an Italian word, but apparently it is an Italian.
It sounds like a Japanese. Sounds like something like Japanese, like with those guys with the big knives that.
Yeah.
Shakshuka. Shakshuka. Ho! It's like egg in a basket. Ho!
Yeah. No.
Eat now. Cut your face off.
Eat now. No. So this woman is not desiring something more in life. Like when I was single, yeah, I lived a fairly selfish life.
Yeah.
And when I got married, then I had to change how I lived because I had to put my wife first. And then, of course, when my son came along, that changed how I worked. Before I got married, I would be like, oh, I don't really like that job. I'll just quit and I'll find a new one. And I'll have kind of a limbo time where I'm not employed. And then once I got married, I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I can't have a period of time where I'm just not employed. I have to be constantly finding something where I'm providing, where I'm supporting, where I'm moving my family forward so that we can be better contributing members of society, and so my family can be in the most advantageous position that they can. when you are married, when you have children, you put other people first by default, or at least you should be putting other people first by default.
Yeah.
And if you're not,
Absolutely.
then of course, the fact that our society is so focused on the promotion of self and the selfish absorption that our society pushes on us, this is why we have divorce rates as high as they are, that they've been the highest that we've seen.
And I mean, this girl, this girl is basically advertising that, by the way, if you take the gamble of trying to get with me, you better believe I am a massive divorce risk because of how self-centered she is. I'm like, dang, she's gonna peace out the second it becomes convenient for her. Like, one last thing I'll say about this. Steven, did you ever see the movie, John Candy movie called Uncle Buck?
No.
You ever seen that movie? Okay, it's a great movie. There's a scene in there where he basically he's talking to like somebody, and he's basically saying, everyone used to tell me, like, Buck, you're so lucky, like you can do whatever you want, you can go out and party, you can go out and do all this kind of stuff and all that. Everyone used to tell me, like, oh man, you're like the luckiest guy ever. And he's like, now that he's in his like 40s, he's just like, nobody says that anymore, like, ever. And like he's now old, sad, and most of his life has passed him by, and he realizes that like not having a family is a gigantic stake, and his life is not amazing as a result. If this woman was actually doing something like something legitimately like beyond herself, if she was like working to end world hunger, or if maybe she was devoting her time to doing missions, or maybe working, I don't know, like doing something productive to help like society or something like that, that'd be a different thing. But she's literally bragging about how every day is about herself and what she wants. This woman is just not contributing anything to society.
Okay, so we have two interesting comments.
We
do.
do.
Of course, Leroy, Converse is the people who make parenting TikToks. They can be just obnoxious, especially those who make parenting TikToks to try and like use parenting TikToks to try and attack other members of their spouse,
or like when they crack eggs on their kids' like face.
Yeah, those ones are just weird.
No, they're just dumb. I don't like those ones.
Yeah, they're silly. And then Console, I'm not exactly 100% on board with that. So he's saying that it's better to put yourself first because at least you know you're saved if the other one doesn't work out. See,
you're
like,
safe. I think you mean safe.
Yeah, like I get the idea of like putting yourself first, and that way it's like you're not invested, and you're not. But then there's always the response of nothing ventured, nothing gained. If you're unwilling to make any sort of sacrifice, if you're not willing any sort of risk in your relationship will never go anything deeper than skin deep.
Yeah.
And so you will face relationship issues because you'll never have any desire to commit to anything more serious than the sensual pleasures of lust. You're not going to experience a really intimate, true love connection because you're never going to put yourself out there, because you're always going to be afraid that they are going to spurn you. And yes, I get it. Like, if you put yourself out there and they reject you and they do all sorts of terrible things, then yes, it hurts like hell. I understand that. But if you do put yourself out there and that person accepts you and cherishes you and loves you, then you will have a relationship deeper than anything you've ever known.
Yeah. It's a big risk.
It's a
big payoff.
Yeah, big payoff for a big risk.
Yeah. You cannot have a meaningful relationship without vulnerability. That is the paradox. Like, it's undeniable. You can have a relationship very shallow and will not be very rewarding if you're always holding back. But yeah. So this woman does not get it. So, anyways, speaking of overly out of touch narcissists, let's talk about Keith Olbermann.
Keith Olbermann. All right. So Keith Olbermann blasted after claiming Riley Gaines sucked at swimming. Sure. So Keith Olbermann had the audacity on Wednesday to tell former collegiate swimmer Riley Gaines the reason she lost the hulking mare swimmer Leah Thomas was because she sucked at swimming. Keith Olbermann, can you address the reality and move past it? You sucked at swimming. That's why you lost. Riley Gaines, who tied for 5th place with Thomas into the 200 free at the NCAA Championships in Atlanta in 2022, has been outspoken against males competing in women's athletic events. Her claims backed up by science that men, by virtue of the testosterone pumping through their bodies, makes them bigger and stronger and faster than women. This makes them innately faster when it comes to both swimming and running, 2 sports where trans-identified males have dominated women's events. Notably, when Gaines and Thomas tied for 5th, Thomas was given the trophy by the NCAA, and Gaines had to wait for her to come in the mail. An NCAA rep told Gaines, "Hey, I just want you to know we only have one 5th place trophy, so yours will be coming in the mail." We went ahead and gave the 5th place trophy to Leah, but you can pose on the podium with the 6th place trophy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Thomas went on to win the NCAA women's swimming national title, was nominated for Women Athlete of the Year, and tried to get on the women's Olympic swim team. But Olbermann thinks Gaines should just get over it.
Of course she does. Of course he does.
And of course, this was entirely because Gaines took aim at Nebraska State Senator Megan Hunt, who doesn't know what a woman is, despite apparently being one.
This is one of the features, not a bug, a feature of people like the really like committed like leftist, the part of the lunatic left is that they love like being a-holes to people that they don't like. That's a feature. If you're a trans activist and somebody's getting like death threats from like trans activists because of something they said, they'll laugh at you, they'll mock you, and they'll be like, "Ah ha ha, you deserve it," or something like that. It's like, you're not a good person. You are legitimately not a good person. It's like, but they believe that it's perfectly fine for them to pretty much like to pee on people who are like to piss on people who are being like attacked, destroyed, or being like hurt by the mob and all that kind of stuff. And yet at the same time they cry foul, they cry victim the second they get any like pushback of any kind, any significant pushback. It's Keith Olbermann is a great example of this kind of thing. I also find it hilarious that Keith Olbermann, like, he makes a Twitter post like this, and I'm like, what's funny? A literally 5-second like Google search would have basically prevented this entirely this entirely ignorant comment. Like, Keith Olbermann is not anything except like not well researched. This guy is like a joke. Like, he's actually like so. He's not even relevant anymore, and the only way he stays relevant is by making like ignorant comments like this and just being like over the top and all that. That's his shtick, man. That's his shtick.
Yeah. No, well, that's kind of just the general shtick of MSNBC. It's just like, oh, how can we make ourselves look dumb today? And Keith Olbermann, he simply won the trophy for first prize today. Usually the first prize trophy goes to, what's her face? The
Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez?
Joy Reid. Joy Reid in MSNBC. She usually wins. Mm-hmm. She is awful. Just awful.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking about dumb takes, that's a stupid way of putting this. If we're talking about people with dumb opinions, let's talk about the ADL.
Oh, yeah.
Musk threatens to sue the ADL after blaming it for X ad sales slump. So, Elon Musk threatened to sue the Anti-Defamation League on Monday after blaming the nonprofit for an advertising revenue slump on X as he led a takeover of the platform, formerly known as Twitter. So he accused the ADL of trying to kill his platform by falsely accusing it and me of being anti-Semitic after the nonprofit reported a spike in hate speech on the platform following the reinstatement of banned accounts there. He said U.S. advertising revenue is still down 60%, primarily due to pressure on advertised by the ADL. That's what the advertisers tell us. So they almost succeeded in killing X/Twitter. Musk said in other posts before threatening to sue the ADL that he's pro-free speech but against anti-Semitism of any kind. Of course, this is his text. If this continues, we will have no choice but to file a defamation suit against, ironically, the Anti-Defamation League. If they lose the defamation suit, we will insist that they drop the anti part of their names, as obviously.
Oh, Elon Musk just ruling the internet, like, just amazing.
And then on Saturday, he responded to a right-wing campaign to ban the ADL and X, saying perhaps we should run a poll on this.
Elon's the best, man. Elon's the best.
Yeah, and this, of course, comes from a report that they published that found over 5,000 examples from February of virulent anti-Semitism from 2,173 accounts on Twitter after accounts were reinstated after free speech advocates Musk's direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, So what they say is anti-Semitism is usually not in any way. It's like what they're saying when they're calling Ben Shapiro a Nazi.
Well, Stephen, do you remember that interview? I think it was a BBC reporter was interviewing Elon Musk, and he said like, "There's been an like incredible like rise in all sorts of hate comments." He's like, "Can you name one?" He's like, well, you know, I you know, like I can't.
I would,
right
but
now.
I can't.
I would, but I can't. Right? Like, you know, like he's trying to like, you know, like cheap out of it. I legitimately believe this talking point is not based on actual like evidence. It's based on like an idea that I don't think is observable. Because like here's what they say. They say like, you know, oh my goodness, all this like all this hatred is not rising. And I'm like you hear people like Tim Pool, people like Jack Posobiec, people like Alex or all these other people, and they say that it's actually gotten better. They don't get as much like, you know, hateful kind of stuff and all that in the same way.
No, because it's very different in how things operate on Twitter. Like, I was a part of Twitter. I think I joined back in 2018, and I got banned within like probably 2 months. I got banned for it was kind of weird how I got banned, because I got banned. I didn't tweet anything wrong. It was just that basically I had a whole bunch of people that they started like a hashtag to report me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I didn't violate any rules. And so they're like, you've been accused of this and this. And I'm like, okay, well, there's no evidence of this. And it's like, well, we're going to ban you anyway. And I'm like, what?
Just for fun.
Oh, like I was like, this is weird and doesn't make any sense. And I don't think my account has been reinstated, but I only had like maybe 1,000 followers. So yeah, it's still suspended, but they're not gonna undo everybody.
Yeah, I like the comment by Leroy Koch. He says that defaming people builds their character. You're doing them a service. It's true. One of the problems with people on the left is that they have paper thin skin, which means that they can't take any criticism. Whereas people who are primarily on the right, or even centrist, like, you know, people who are not like, you know, conservative in any means, but they're just kind of like, you know, regular people. They know how to operate in a somewhat hostile environment. And this is the problem. It's not that there's more hate. It's that the people like there's two groups. The people who are easily offended are getting more easily offended because they feel like they have no censorship power. So again, one of the reasons why people are not getting as much hate comments and attacks is because they're not working. In the past, all you had to do is like mass report or like, you know, mass flag a comment and it'll be removed. So you're empowering the worst elements of Twitter. But now people don't get that power anymore. You have to actually have a legitimate complaint, and so people they give up.
Yeah,
but then the other side,
I laughed so hard because, like, I remember back in September to December when in the immediate aftermath of Elon taking over, and I would say something that was perfectly normal for a conservative to say, and they'd be like reported, and I'm like, and I'd like have a gif of somebody like checking their clock, be like, oh wait, just checking to see if Elon still runs the company. Yes, he does.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, and Reddit is definitely a cesspool. It is just filled with cess.
But it's like when you go to Reddit, you know what you're getting into. It's kind of like if you go to TikTok, you know what you're getting into. You're not going into like, you know, high intellectually like stimulating content. You're looking at the lowest of the lowbrow, you know. So it's like, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
My approach with any social media is stop treating people like they're children. Treat them like they're adults and that they're like they're capable enough to make their own decisions. That's the way it should be. Obviously, people should have tools to you know, prevent like, you know, like harassment, defaming, and all sorts of things. But you shouldn't just ban people. Like, it's not about protecting people from the big scary world. It's not. Stop trying to make social media like a safe space, like in university campuses, which is what they're doing. They're trying to make Facebook into a safe space. It's like, oh, nothing scary and wrong is out there. Like, you're just infantilizing people and making them basically like, like emotional hemophiliacs. That's basically what you're doing. So anyways, let's talk about people who are not emotional hemophiliacs, but are being canceled by emotional hemophiliacs.
Yes.
Steven?
Let's talk about what's going on with pro-lifers. So from Catholic Review, 5 pro-life activists sent to federal prison for blocking Washington abortion clinic. This isn't even honest because they were just conspiring. So after a raucous jury trial, 5 pro-life activists face as many as 11 years in prison for convictions to conspire to blockade a Washington abortion clinic in 2020. So convicted August 29th for conspiracy against rights and violation of the Federal Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, or FACE Act. Both are felonies. Lauren Handy, John Hinshaw, Heather Adoni, William Goodman, and Herb Garrity. Because Judge Colleen Culler-Catelli ruled that using force to prevent women from entering clinic is a violent crime by statute, the 5 were incarcerated immediately.
I'm very... Whenever I hear these kind of stories, like, like about what they claim happened and all that, I'm instantly like skeptical.
Oh,
I'm
so
like
skeptical.
I am super skeptical. I'm like, I know how pro-lifers work. The idea that they're saying that they're using force to prevent women, I'm like, you know what? Until I see hard evidence that that's the case, I'm like, I'm going to assume that that's probably spin and probably exaggeration. But go on.
Yeah. So they argue that under federal law and binding precedents from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the FACE Act is not categorically a crime of violence and should not lead to pre-sentencing detention. The FACE Act text, the motion argues, specifically distinguishes physical obstruction from force and threat of force. In addition to prison
right there.
Yeah.
They're not even using violence. They're just getting in the way.
Yep. Each defendant faces fines of up to $350,000 and 3 years of supervised release. Second group of 4 defendants goes on trial in September, with sentencing for all 9 to follow later this year. So that they're going to bring back these ones for a second group of charges. The activist abortion clinic blockade, which lasted about 3 hours and was live streamed on Facebook, occurred on October 22nd, 2020. Testimony from witnesses described Hardy, the lead defendant, as presenting the plan for blocking the abortion clinic entrance and interfering with office operations. One witness said Handy also told them about the FACE Act. Testimony described Handy and Joan Bell, defendant who will be part of the second group, waiting outside the clinic doors. Garrity and Goodman hid in the emergency stairwell with a bag of locks and chains. Hinshaw used the chains to tie himself to chairs, closing off the access to the back of the clinic. So they were inspired. I wouldn't say they were inspired, but they were just convinced by a video from Live Action purporting to show the medical director of the clinic saying he wouldn't aid a baby born alive after the abortion. Judge Culler-Catelli barred the video from the trial, calling it propaganda, and prohibited Handy from claiming she was acting in defense of another person.
Sure, dear. Yeah.
Which is, that's all pro-life activism in any form is acting in defense of another person. Nothing about pro-life activism is for your own good, for your own benefit.
Yeah. By the way, okay, so let's take comparable circumstances. Let's take that incident that happened last week. Remember the one where those like idiots were blocking a highway in, was it Nevada? Like that concert, and they were blocking the highway, and they were literally obstructing
for Burning Man, which is hilarious. What happened to Burning Man?
Right, but like they were blocking the entire highway. Are they going to look at 11 years in prison? Are they going to look at like are they going to get like 350,000? Actually, you know what? You know what's more likely, Stephen? They're probably going to get some kind of like settlement, and they're probably going to get paid because of the so-called mistreatment that they face from the police officers. I'm guessing. Remember how BLM activists like they burned down like cities?
We're going to address that later on the show.
Yeah, they got payouts from like those kind of the things. So. Like I like the statement that you don't live in a just or a free society if you have laws. You live in a just and free society if the laws are applied equally. That's why in America people there do not live in a just society. They don't have a justice system. They have a legal system. That means that the laws are not applied equally. You have, like we talked about, like I think it was like maybe 2 weeks ago. There was that guy, Joe Biggs from, anyways, he was at the Capitol during the January protest, and he got, what was it, like 17 years? Was it, Stephen? 17 years, I think it was, for knocking over a fence.
Yep.
And you're like that is bonkers. 17 years for doing that. Meanwhile, BLM and Antifa activists are burning down buildings, literally arson that could have led to like dozens of people dying, maybe hundreds and all that. No, just a little slap on the wrist. You're fine. Go back to your your crazy ways and all that. That's why I always tell people, BLM, Antifa, these are the modern day paramilitary organizations. They're the paramilitary wing of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is modeling itself after the fascist, governments of like World War II, in the world. Like fascist governments from like Mussolini's Italy to Germany to Spain to Argentina to Colombia. They have fascist governments. This is how they operate. They basically have their legitimate so-called wing, which is like the face of their government, and then they have their hidden, they're behind the scenes that they claim that they have no connection to them, but really they're basically doing the dirty work for them. Like the Democrats, that was the Ku Klux Klan. That's exactly what they did. They basically did what they couldn't do in public, they did in secret. That's why they wore hoods. That's why they covered their faces. Guess who else covers their faces when they do these things, Stephen? Antifa and BLM. They cover their faces because they're basically criminals. They don't want to get caught. So, so it's crazy the kind of world that we live in right now, where people can basically, people who are protesting get a completely different result by the courts, depending on which
what they're protesting.
Yeah, if these were pro-choice activists at a what do you call it, a pregnancy care center?
Oh,
nothing. They wouldn't.
I doubt even. I'll quickly look it up. I'll see. So that was Buffalo clinic firebombed.
Okay.
Let's see if there has been any charges. So, yeah, the clinic that got firebombed in Buffalo, the police didn't even open an investigation. They had to open their own investigation into it. And they didn't have the resources to actually find out anything because
they say that, but they're pathological liars. Same ideas in Canada when the entire hoax, which I think this should be a massive scandal in Canada. The whole like children mass graves in the residential schools, that was completely made up.
Yep.
And guess what? There was a wave of arson all across Canada, and they're like, oh well, we just don't have the resources to go after them. And they're just a bunch of rascals. They're good kids. They're just really angry, and they have a right to be angry. Oh, because you basically told them a complete lie and encouraged them to attack people that you don't like. And it's incredible. They suddenly they drag their feet and they're like, ooh, we can't do anything because they're politically advantageous to us. That's basically how it works. It's terrible. So yeah, I wish these people all the best. I think these people are really brave because they're willing to legitimately face very serious consequences from a weaponized political system that hates them.
Well, it was interesting because I was listening to this story on Timcast IRL, and Tim Pool is like, why are all they doing? Why is all they're doing is blockading it? Why aren't they doing more? And I'm like, if we were doing more to stop abortion, if we were doing more to prevent these things from happening, then it would never be decriminalized. We look at the past 10 years, past probably 15 years. Past 15 years, there's been 2 incidents of violence against abortion clinics or abortion providers. The one was the assassination of, I forget his name. It was an abortion provider. And the other one was the Planned Parenthood bombing. Or the Planned Parenthood, I think it was a shooting in 2015. And these incidents these incidents turned people against the pro-life movement because they're like, oh, well, they're getting violent to support their cause. And it's like, we want to be able to overcome this with the law. We want to have this criminalized. We want to have this be unthinkable.
Yeah.
And if we are actually taking drastic measures to stop abortion, be like, yes, we'll stop some abortions in the short term, but we are not going to stop it in the long term, because all we're going to do is get a lot of people arrested, and then we will turn public sentiment against pro-life.
Yeah.
And I was like, Tim, like, why aren't like, it's kind of weird that you're not realizing this. And he's like, if you actually thought that these were human beings, then you'd be doing more. And it's like, guess what? If we were doing more, then they would arrest us all.
Yeah.
And then what gain is that if we're all arrested?
It's the same rationale for why conservatives actually say don't get violent in protest. If you get violent, they can use that against you, and they can use it to justify all sorts of crackdowns. That's the way that because you have to remember, the battle is not just against the system that's doing this harm, but it's also a battle of, like, convincing people to your cause. You have to convince people that you have the moral high ground, and you have to expose the government as being the true criminals, enabling evil to persist and to continue to go on. If you play into their game and actually get violent, then what you're doing is you're actually hurting your own cause, because remember, they have the biggest microphones, so they can, like, the media, so they can basically use that and be like, even now, media still refers to the violent pro-lifers, and it's like, that was from 1985.
Yeah.
Like, you serious?
Well, yeah,
I
find it hilarious because they're like, pro-lifers are terrorists, and I'm like, okay, like, how would you argue for that? And they're like, look how many people they've killed, and I'm like, okay, they've killed 3 people in 50 years. And I'm like, seriously? That's a history of violence to you? For an entire movement that represents hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people in the Western, over 1 billion people in the Western world? Really? This is what you consider violent. This is such an egregious double standard, especially considering the violence that happens to pro-lifers at almost every single encounter they have. We think about back in 2020 when we had what was it called?
Freedom March?
No, not the Freedom March. It was the pro-life one. What was it called?
They were advocating for pro-choice things.
No. It was the one that we went to and we interviewed people.
Oh, the Life Chain.
Life Chain. So if you're in Calgary, we invite you to come out for Life Chain first Sunday in October, and we're going to be there. Probably not conducting interviews, but it's become an event for me and my family, and we go out and have some interesting people. But yeah, there was one guy, and they started a fight 100 meters away from us because this guy was so angry that we were standing up against abortion. Utterly ridiculous. But other things that are ridiculous, we're going to move on to the next story. And I know Conquerworm has been really on top of this story. He was enraged about it before the show started, so let's talk about it.
Champing at the bit.
Champing at the bit. Ex-Proud Boy leader Enrique Tarrio jailed for 22 years. Says for Capitol riot, but he wasn't even there. So the Proud Boys' former leader has been jailed for 22 years for orchestrating the United States Capitol riot, the longest sentence so far for a ringleader of the raid. Henry Enrique Tarrio was convicted of seditious conspiracy, a Civil War-era charge. What was that noise?
For some reason, my thing kind of logged out.
Of what?
I lost my connection, so I got logged out of Discord for a second there.
Oh,
I'm back now.
I can still hear you, so we're good.
Yeah.
So, Tarrio 39 was not in Washington during the riots, but helped organize the far-right group's involvement. That he was just saying, be like, hey, you guys should go to Washington. Didn't say to get violent, didn't say anything about breaking into the Capitol. and they give him 22 years.
Yeah.
So this is it's weird that he apologized to police and residents of Washington, D.C. for his role in January 26th or the January 6th, 2021 riots. So, quote, "I'm extremely ashamed and disappointed that they were caused grief and suffering," he told Washington's federal courthouse. "I will have to live with that shame for the rest of my life. I was my own worst enemy. My hubris convinced me that I was the victim and targeted unfairly." Tario said, "I'm not a political zealot. Inflicting harm or changing the results of the election was not my goal. I don't think it's even possible to change the results of an election. Please show me mercy. I ask that you not take my 40s from me." Like,
yeah, this sounds
I understand. This is
confession.
Yeah, this is
Forced
yeah, it is. This is what is it?
Under duress.
Maoist China, the struggle session.
Yeah, struggle session.
It's basically just like it's like, oh yeah, plead for a lesser sentence because I'm going to give you 22 years. It's like 22 years for not even being in the same area. And it's like organizing a protest is not a crime by any rational standard. We're going to talk about that later with Tamara Lich. But this is absolutely deplorable that he is getting 22 years for this. He did not tell them, break into the Capitol. He did not tell them, oh, go attack a police officer. He did not incite them to anything. All he did was tell them to go to Washington. And then he couldn't even go himself.
Yep.
Like, this is not criminal activity, but he's being punished worse. Like, he's being punished worse than murderers.
These guys are political prisoners.
Well, and then, like, even in this next story that Conquerworm sent us, thank you, Conquerworm, he is being punished more than this man. Rochester man given 180 days in jail for raping girls. The victims were between 4 and 9 years old at the time. There was no moving on or getting over it. One said in court.
Yeah,
What you say
about this guy here, Steven, on Twitch?
I know. This guy should be put
he
to a long rope.
He should have gotten a much more severe sentence. This should be years in prison,
decades for this.
Decades. Because it's aggravated. Because it's bad enough. Okay, so it's bad enough to rape people. So a rapist, just plain and simple, if you rape a woman, like, especially a violent rape, that should be several years in prison. Then add on top of that these are underage children. So if these were like 13, 14, 15-year-old girls, that's aggravating. But then add to that the fact that these are 4 and 9 years old. All of these should be aggravating. It's like adding a hate crime, designation to a crime or something like that, right?
Yeah.
These should be aggravating. This shows you that we don't have a justice system. We have a legal system, which means that the legal system is abused and they create a two-tier system. In other words, we have a system of law that is basically punishing citizens that are actually not the bad ones and incentivizing real criminals. This is why San Francisco, New York, Chicago, this is why those cities are literally like the purge. Like, nobody is enforcing the law. Nobody is holding these people accountable. But you get people like from January 6th. These are political prisoners that the government is basically using January 6th as an excuse to throw everything they can and to abuse the legal system in order to scare the crap out of anybody who would even think of opposing their agenda. In other words, they want you to be scared of even saying that they might have stolen an election, even though it there's mountains of evidence. Doesn't matter. They want you to be petrified of not only of going to protest. They want you to be scared of protesting. They want you to be scared of even saying anything against their elections. That's why this is a police state. This is the kind of actions that you read about in Cuba. You read about them during if you guys have ever watched the Hong Kong protests a couple of years ago, the way that the Chinese government dealt with the protesters in Hong Kong was horrible. And believe it or not, this is what they're doing here. They're doing the exact same thing. They're using the law and they're abusing it in order to create political prisoners to shut up their opposition and to scare anyone from even thinking of opposing the government. This is why people are saying America is becoming a banana republic that doesn't actually like follow the law. And here's a big thing. Tim Pool talks about this all the time. I really agree with him. Is that there is a point that you have to be very careful. There's a point to which, if you go too far, if you go way too overboard in the way that you punish people, you remove any incentive whatsoever from people even to follow the law at all. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are a I don't know, you're a 25-year-old man and you have a choice. Okay? The police are like, you're protesting, like you're properly protesting. The police are like threatening to arrest you and all that. If you know that if I comply, maybe I'll get off better and all that kind of stuff. Now, like hearing about these guys getting 22 years, 17 years, all these kind of years for doing virtually nothing.
Yeah.
What incentive do they have to actually behave or to comply or even to participate?
Well, yeah, this is how you scare people from participating. Well, and we're seeing the same thing with the trials for the Freedom Convoy members. This is how you scare people out of participating in public protest. And then eventually, when you have people that are scared enough, they will not participate in public protest. But when things get bad enough and they stop trusting in kind of the establishments of law and order, of justice, and the media and the government, then eventually people will get pissed off enough that there actually will be an armed insurrection, or there will be like small coups taking over little areas of the country because they no longer believe in the powers that be that are actually, they no longer believe that they're actually out for their good. And that they're actually enforcing what is best for the people of that nation.
Well, I mean, look at it here. Like, just for an example, here in Calgary, we have seen dozens of examples of the police literally breaking their own laws, literally acting acting like goons and following orders, even though those orders are completely and totally against the law. I saw this video from Rebel News yesterday. It was like a father recorded this. He went to police officers during the Pride Parade here in Calgary.
Yep.
There was a guy who had exposed himself. Literally got...
I think this was in Toronto.
Was it Toronto? Okay, I thought it was Calgary. Okay. Anyways, he went up to the police. He said, like, this man literally exposed himself to children on the street. Any other day of the week, that would have been arrestable. The police well, nothing I can do. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you're basically saying that you've officially designated that there's a group of people that are above the law. That's literally what you've done. You're not enforcing the law properly, and you can't even give a good rationale. You know it's hypocritical. You know it's nonsense. You know it's completely crazy, but you're still doing it. And so, think about it from a regular person's view. Those kind of actions make you believe that your police department and the police forces are not legitimate, that they are basically nothing more than goons. They're not there for you. They're not there to protect you. They're not there to enforce the law. They're basically there as muscle or as thugs for the people in power. And so what reason do you have to comply with them? Because if you think that they're illegitimate right now, I will be honest. If a police officer came to my house, right now, and asked and knocked on my door and said, hey, we have some reports of some stuff happening in a neighborhood, like a burglary or something like that. Can we ask you a couple questions? I'd be like, no, go away. I don't want to talk to you. Why? Because I don't respect the police in Calgary. I legitimately know the police chief and the police officers. They're basically acting, and they have not done anything to change that impression. They basically act like basically paid enforcers for the current government, not as public servants. And so I have very little respect for police officers, not individuals. I mean, obviously there's always going to be some that are good, some that are bad, but unfortunately they all work for the same system, and unfortunately the ones that actually had the balls to say, no, I will not do this because this is wrong, have already left, already been kicked out. So what do you get left? You got the worst ones. You got the bad apples that are willing to do like anything that they're told for a paycheck.
Yep.
And so you're creating the ingredients for public for like all sorts of problems. And it's by design, of course. This is not accident. These are not just dumb people. They know what they're doing. Sadly, this is the way it's going to go. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of people are worried that things are going to get worse before they ever get better, particularly in the States and especially in Canada too. But we should kind of move on because we've been sticking on the story for a bit.
Yep. So, talking about bogus charges, or not bogus charges, talking about bogus reactions. Let's talk about BLM and the incident involving someone named Takaya Young.
That sounds very much like a what do you call it? That's like a BLM kind of name. Yeah, like 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 we hear names that like are not generically like common in like I guess North American culture. These are names of like people who are from the Black community, like Takaya,
Makaya.
Yeah. It's every community, every cultural demographic has names that are very common within their demographic. The Asian community, the Black community, the Muslim community, they all have names that are common. So this sounds like
what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it out. Danny and I are going to watch the video, and you guys will hear the audio because of social media. Showing the video would be taken down. So I'm going to talk about it. So Takaya Young and her unborn daughter died after a police officer fired at her through her car windshield. She was being told to get out of the vehicle after being accused of theft. A lawyer for her family accused the police of gross misuse of power. So let's just watch this video. Danny and I. If it loads.
They'll have sound, right?
Yeah, they'll have sound.
Okay.
Then get out. No, then get out.
So here,
Get out of the car.
the officer's outside of her car.
And then she just tries to drive over the officer, and then he shoots her in the head.
He was in front of the
yeah.
And the car's still moving. He's trying to like open the door to let her out. I see this incident a lot, actually.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not saying that the officers deserved any of this or that she deserved any of this, but this is what you get.
Mm-hmm. This is what happens.
This is what happens. The Black community have been told in big ways that cops are bad and they're out to get you. And so people like this are going to be scared of police officers, and they're always going to be jumpy. And as a result, you get these kind of incidents. And by the way, we're getting to that point where like this is going to be every community, from the Asian community to the white community to the I don't know, whatever community it is, they're going to be scared of cops.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, I'm actually even scared of cops now because I feel like the cops are
we're scared of cops. Like we have a distrust of cops for an entirely different reason. Like in the United States, you have kind of like nobody really trusts cop anymore. You have the people who don't trust cops on the left that are saying, "Oh, like cops are institutionally racist," and those are the people that are saying, "Oh, like the lawyers for her family." Saying that her death was avoidable and calling for the author who shot her to be fired immediately and charged. Like, what he did was not racially motivated, clearly. I think the cop that was telling her to get out of the vehicle at the side, believe he was Black. And so this incident, like the entire reason that she died is because instead of facing justice, she just decides, nope, I don't want to. I'm going to escape. She was pregnant. Do you know what she was stealing, Danny?
Some kind of food, wasn't it?
Liquor.
Oh, okay.
It's like, oh yeah, that's a totally normal thing to steal when you're pregnant. So it's not, oh, I'm stealing to feed my family. Nope. You're stealing because you have 2 kids at home and you have another on the way. And the kids have no father figure, likely. and you want to. This is a form of escapism. This is why there are such massive issues in these communities, and there's so little accountability in the Black community, and it's so appalling. Like, it angers me that there are not more Black leaders saying, "Hey, why can we not be accountable for this?"
Yeah, it gets bad.
Oh,
like
it's so bad.
I don't, Steven, can you like skip ahead, go to the story from Breitbart, because I think this is related, and this will kind of like put a little bit of a connection to this. So so one of the problems right now is that we're basically making an environment that makes it virtually impossible to get good cops. Anywhere. Cops are quitting en masse. Yep. The recruitment is becoming a real problem for police stations. The hyper, almost like witch hunt style attacks on cops and police officers makes it so that they're scared of even enforcing the law, because they can basically get put on viral video and their entire lives could be ruined. We've seen like dozens of officers that have been absolutely like raked through the coals over the last couple of years for incidents where they basically made a mistake, and that mistake is now like ruined their lives forever. And so a lot of officers are like, this is not worth it. Like, not only am I putting my life on a risk, but I'm basically being I'm always walking on eggshells, and if I do something politically incorrect, I'm going to be like basically going to be destroyed. Like, this is not the kind of environment that you're going to get good officers. As a result, you're having massive massive amounts of cops that are quitting, police departments that just do not have enough officers, and sadly, that means you're going to have worse policing because you have a lot of untrained officers, not experienced officers. You have a lot of untrained officers who don't know how to properly respond and do not have the training or experience to do so. Even do you remember in Atlanta, Stephen? They were trying to build that police training facility, and then Antifa showed up and they basically firebombed it and tried to stop it. Even though that facility is what you would want, because that's the kind of thing that would help prevent these kind of incidents from happening with proper training. But no. Any police is bad. Police bad, So yeah, it's just terrible. So take a look at the story.
Yeah. Okay. So from Breitbart. As Goodhue Police Chief Josh Smith struggles this summer to fill vacancies in his small department, he warned the town city council that unless pay benefits improve, finding new officers would never happen. When nothing changed, Smith quit. So did his few remaining officers, leading the Minnesota town of 1,300 residents to shutter his police force in late August. America is in the midst of a police officer shortage that many in law enforcement blame on the twofold morale hit of 2020, the pandemic and criticism of police that boiled over with the murder of George Floyd by a police officer from Minnesota to Maine, Ohio to Texas. Small towns unable to fill jobs are eliminating their police departments and turning over police work to their county sheriff, a neighboring town, or state police. The trend isn't altogether new. At least 521 towns or cities with a population of 1,000 to 200,000 disbanded policing between 1972 and 2017, according to a 2022 paper by Rice University professor of economics Richard T. Boylan. Past 2 years, at least 12 small towns have dissolved their departments. Goodhue County is now under contract for law enforcement duties in the town of Goodhue, even as Sheriff Marty Kelly tries to fill 4 vacancies in his own department. He said that there's around 10 applicants for those jobs. By comparison, one open position in 2019 drew 35 applicants. Kelly knows that in order to get full staffing, he has to hire new deputies away from other towns or counties, creating vacancies in other places that will struggle to fill them. It's scary. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we're not alone. Yeah. So, this is an issue that's twofold. Yeah. We've talked about that. Yes, it was hit by COVID. It was hit by the kind of claims of racism and institutional issues, and then on top of that, you had cops, especially here in Canada, you had cops that was enforcing illegal mandates, illegal decrees, and taking away basic freedom and rights in an arbitrary fashion and completely against any sort of have any sort of decency. We had cops in Calgary, like, we had cops trying to tase a young man skating by himself. We had cops arresting pastors here in Alberta.
That was really stupid.
We had, like, there were lots and lots of issues of cops taking advantage of the COVID hysteria and the power that they were granted over people, and they lorded it over others, and they made people suffer. We think back to, like, when we went to the freedom marches, be like, all right, well, these are protests. And I remember for months, you and I would take, before we went to the protest, we would take out our IDs.
Yeah, we
would leave them in the vehicle, because we're like, okay, well, if we don't have IDs, then it's really hard for them to ticket us. It's really hard for them to find us. And then a lot of people started doing that. And so cops started following people to their cars in order to give them tickets. Be like, well, I'm going to start ticketing you just for showing up to a dissenting protest.
That's when you basically just start walking around aimlessly around downtown.
Oh, yeah. You're just like, all right, I'm going to walk around for a while, and it's going to be like 45 minutes to an hour before I get back to my car. I got time. I don't have to go back right away.
Well,
like,
the one thing
that we totally disbanded any idea of public trust with our authorities and our justice system. And then, of course, everything that's happened over the past few years has only made it worse.
Yeah, like things have gotten worse because the police departments have gotten worse. The media's gotten worse. Like they were like already really bad, and now they're just becoming like absolutely like a joke. They're basically no better than tabloids. They're like the Pravda for Canada. And then you have all the politicians and authorities that basically will never take your call or never respond to an email at all. If I think you are able to contact your council member. I think Stephen.
Oh yeah, well I have one of the only good ones in the city.
Yeah, I've tried to contact mine. They never respond. They never.
Yep.
You have to go to the city to email them. They don't have an email. You basically have to go on the city website, contact them through the city, portal, and then they'll never respond.
See, yeah, that's one reason I'm very happy to be in Sean Chu's district, because I contacted him via the city portal, and then he went and actually looked me up in kind of a city directory, and he found my cell phone number, and he called me, and he's like, "Okay, I've dedicated an hour to listen to you."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. All right. And I'm like, oh.
That is rare nowadays.
Oh, it's exceptionally rare. That's why I appreciate Sean Chu so much. That's why, when people were attacking him online, I'm like, no, I'm not having it.
Yeah. We live in a totally backward society where it's just the worst elements of society are empowered, and the best elements of society are basically mistreated and suppressed.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to think more. You have to think more strategically nowadays. That's the problem.
Well, and of course, to go along with the worst elements of society being rewarded, NYPD agrees to stop penning in demonstrators as a part of settlement over 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. So they've agreed to overhaul the way they respond to protests, including by no longer penning in large groups of activists as part of a settlement. The deal reached in the Manhattan Federal Court and approved by a judge that will end a crowd control tactic known as kettling, a term that describes officers barricading in protesters before arresting or taking other actions against them. It will create a new four-tiered strategy of dealing with protests, starting with a hands-off approach to peaceful protests, quote-unquote. I love how they have the peaceful protests in quotes.
Yes.
Because it's specifically in reference to BLM, but still allowing the department to escalate its response if officers find a demonstration to be dangerous or illegal if it blocks major traffic arteries under the terms of the settlement. Which, of course, we know is not going to happen, because everything that we saw from 2020 it wouldn't just start with it hands off, it would remain hands off. And of course, in cities around the country, BLM has been awarded, I believe it was in the total of around $30 million.
Something ridiculous like that, yeah.
Across the country, and be like, oh yeah, we handled the BLM protests too violently. It's like, no, you didn't. You didn't handle them enough. You're like, you need to do more. You needed to arrest them when they started attacking people. Oh, yes. Leroy, I'll post the... So, just a quick kind of mention. We have a guest server that I will link. We have a open mic that happens once per month. So, that will happen at the end of September. And so at the end of September, people can join the guest server. And we just have a discussion. We have a longer show, and we kind of just talk about whatever our guests want to talk about, and then of course mention the news of the day.
Yeah, you can also contact us through the Discord server as well. Yeah.
So yeah, if you want any of our links that we have about anything that we talk about, feel free to send us messages, send us emails, or contact us via the Discord, and we'll happy to send that on the way. But let's move on to the next story of the issue, which is also related to kind of justice. Soros' son complains that another MAGA-style presidential victory would imperil globalist vision. Oh, okay. Alex Soros, son of arch-globalist Open Society founder George Soros, writes in an op-ed that he is worried that another Trump victory or MAGA-style victory in the United States election will endanger the unity of globalists in Europe. I believe a MAGA-style Republican victory in the next year's U.S. presidential election could, in the end, be worse for the European Union than for the U.S. Such an outcome will imperil European unity and undermine the progress achieved on many fronts in response to the war in Ukraine. What progress?
Because they have a plan. They're like Rocket Raccoon, but evil.
Soros noted that there should be absolutely no doubt that we will continue to support our foundation in Ukraine. We're proud of the network of civil society groups it has assisted with over 250 million since 2014. Has played such an important role in Kiev's resilience in the face of Russia's horrific war of aggression. He also calls for the EU to hand memberships to the Balkan countries to bolster European security and avoided creating a geopolitical vacuum. Trump has vowed to quickly end the war in Ukraine in one day and should be reelected by cutting off funding. I think it's should he be reelected. I would tell Zelensky, no more, you got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give them more than they've ever got. If we don't have to, we'll give them deal done in one day. And that, like, this is how you, like, kind of, Ben Shapiro's talked about this. There needs to be
an off-ramp.
There needs to be an off-ramp. Yeah. Like, the way that the war is happening right now, everything that has happened with how the European Union has responded, with how NATO has responded, with how the Canadians and the Americans, everything is, we just want to support Ukraine. Okay, what's your end goal? Ukraine wants all of their territory back. Okay, Russia's not going to give that to them. What's their end goal? Be like, okay, what's the off-ramp? They don't have one. They want all their territory back. Russia is not going to let you take it. So what's the end goal? Well, Zelensky's end goal is World War III. If he can't claim it back by normal use of force. It is absolutely ridiculous.
I think that so I'm going to say something that I want to see if people put a 10 in the chat if you agree with my theory, and put a 1 if you totally disagree, you think I'm totally off and all that kind of stuff. So here's the theory I have. I have a theory. Okay. The way I look at it is that in 2016, all the powers, the people that are in control of the states, the deep state, as well as global powers, they all expected Hillary Clinton is going to win, and we have plans of how we're going to establish our 2030 plans, right? To their surprise and shock, Trump won, and that threw them off horribly. So they spent the next 4 years planning how to basically orchestrate the removal of Trump, and they basically use COVID as one of their vehicles in various ways to try to completely take Trump out. One, because it made Trump look bad and it destroyed all the progress, all the prosperity that was going to make him a shoo-in for re-election. Two, they used it to create mail-in ballots and all sorts of shenanigans that they did 2020, and then obviously January 6th they used that as well. Now I think what's going to happen is that these globalists need people in key positions around the world in order to accomplish their plans. Trump's 3 years when he was president, the first 3 years, were a gigantic monkey wrench in their plans for world domination. And so this is why they orchestrated the whole pandemic to basically serve as a way of completely and totally taking him out of office in at least impression of legitimacy. However, I think right now they can't do the same thing, so they're going to plan some other way of taking them out. And if they can't do it legally with all these legal challenges that they're using right now, they're going to get even more desperate. They, what is his name? Tucker Carlson said that these people are nuts. They will do anything they have power. They will declare World War III in order to try to see if they can get there. And a lot of people, including Dan Bongino, are saying they might even be crazy enough to either try to get Trump killed or at least injured, by assassination or something like that. This is how crazy these people are and how much they're willing to go out of their way to stop him. So we're not dealing with a normal times. We're dealing with people who are absolutely desperately bent on power, and they will do anything that they can to hold on to it. This is why they can't stand the idea that Trudeau might be ousted in Canada. So we have to be careful here because there's every chance. And these people have no problem cheating. If they can cheat and get away with it, they will cheat to keep Trudeau in power because that's important to them. They will. That's how they got Macron in France. That's how they got all these other groups and all that. These people are using the legitimacy of countries' governments, and they're trying to undermine it and put people in positions of power. So right now, my theory is that the whole 2020 election was orchestrated to remove Trump from office because he is not on board with their plan. They have a global vision and plan and strategy, and Trump gets in the way. This is why this is happening. That's the big picture. So I think, I don't know. I think it's obvious.
That's Mrs. Marine Le Pen. That's true.
That's
Certainly
true.
Mrs. Marine Le Pen. No, I'll take a slightly. So I think. So you were saying that, of course, that COVID was orchestrated.
COVID was part of a bigger strategy.
Yeah, and I'm on board with the idea that pushing the severity of COVID was part of a bigger strategy. I think that they were just waiting for something to happen, and then they're like, okay, there's this unknown virus that nobody knows anything about, and now we're going to push the idea that it's the worst thing in the world, and we heard endless articles and endless commentators on news saying, COVID is the worst thing we've seen, it's the worst pandemic since the Spanish flu. Yeah. And it's like, well, that's really serious. We have to take this. And then as more data came out, you had stories about the doctors in California. You had studies coming out from Germany. It's like, this isn't nearly as bad as they were saying. This is actually, the hysteria was starting to fade. And they're like, we need to get rid of those stories. We need to silence this. It's like everything that came out that disagreed. And we were victim to this, of course, as well. Because of course we got our account suspended from YouTube twice.
We lost 2 channels.
Because we're like, okay, well, the first one was just like, all right, I'm gonna post whatever we want. So I don't care because they're not gonna do it, and then they did immediately, and I was like, oh no, yeah, mass hysteria and forcing people to stay home was the best way to tank a booming economy. That is 100% the case.
Yeah, I think people think that. Okay, so did you saw the movie Stephen, The Big Short?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. You know how that at one point one of the main characters he said you people think that that this is that these people are that you still believe in the system, but underneath all the evil and all the shenanigans and all the criminalities happening, underneath it all is all stupidity. I agree that on some level there's a level of stupidity going on in the Canadian government, in the American government, and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, don't underestimate these people. There are people at all over the world who have an enormous
amount of. I'm just gonna be right back.
Sure. Okay. There's people all over the world who have a plan. They have a strategy of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. They basically want to orchestrate culture, a societal collapse. So right now, the Chinese government, they're we all know what they've done with TikTok. In China, TikTok, they have a different version of TikTok, and it's trying to move their young people towards being better citizens and being better people. In America, TikTok is basically being used to undermine America's youth and turn them stupid and turn them crazy and to empower the worst of society on children. China would love nothing more than for America to basically like implode or at least to self-destruct and making them no longer a major threat to their plans. China would much rather have America weakened by people basically committing suicide, by destroying the family, by undermining the economy, all these kind of things, than to actually go to war with them. That would be much easier, and that means that they can now steamroll over Taiwan. They can steamroll and take over much more of the world. They can expand their military and not have to worry about these things. So there are bad actors all over the world that are interfering, and we know in Canada the Chinese government has intentionally and very obviously interfered in elections, and the Trudeau government basically did everything that they could to cover it up. So this is happening. This is a global plan. That's why that article is very very helpful to help you see that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we do have to move on to more of kind of the government's plan for controlling our lives. So let's talk about the start of controlling our lives again. Jill Biden positive for COVID. President Biden tests negative, White House says. First Lady Joe Biden tests positive for COVID-19 just days before Joe Biden tested negative is due to travel with a group of 20 summit in India. So his 72-year-old wife, whose symptoms are described as mild, last had COVID in August of last year. Yeah. How many times have you had COVID, Danny?
Once. One time.
Yeah. I don't even remember having it.
Oh, ever. You may have had it. You may have had a
super mild.
Version.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. Like the only time I ever got tested was when I got tested to go into a casino because the casino was offering testing if you were going to eat, because otherwise you had to show proof of vaccination to go eat. So that was the only restaurant meal I had for like the 6 months that they had that operation. That was the only restaurant meal that I sat down and ate. But this is just the beginning. It's like, oh yeah, where the president's wife has COVID. We need to take COVID super seriously.
Quick question, Stephen. How do you think they tested for that?
Probably PCR.
Yeah. Because, of course, they didn't learn anything.
No.
And if anybody who is not familiar, we've been talking about this since COVID started. PCR is the biggest scam ever. It is the most absolutely ridiculously broken system of testing. It was never intended to be a testing system. It was a research tool that was hijacked and turned into a testing regimen that has millions of problems. It is the most completely BS system of it's just ridiculous. I couldn't believe once we found the info about PCR tests, I was like, this is the biggest scam ever perpetrated to people ever. It was unbelievable. But yeah, what were we going to say about the? Are you going to bring up Fauci?
Yeah.
Right.
So Dr. Fauci returns, telling people that they should wear masks, and he gets harangued by CNN.
Yes.
So here's the video. This is just, I find this hilarious. And of course it's posted by Rand Paul, because Rand Paul
is just... Of course it is.
He's so on point with COVID. It's awesome. Let's watch.
Brett Stevens in The Times talked about Cochrane. Put that on the screen. The most rigorous and comprehensive analysis of scientific studies conducted on the efficacy of masks for reducing the spread of respiratory illness, including COVID-19, was published last month. Its conclusions, said Tom Jefferson, the Oxford epidemiologist who is the lead author, were unambiguous. There is just no evidence that masks, make any difference, he told the journalist Mayan Damasi, full stop. But wait, hold on. What about the N95 masks as opposed to the lower quality surgical or cloth masks? Makes no difference. None of it, he said. Well, what about the studies that initially persuaded policymakers to impose mask mandates? They were convinced by non-randomized studies, flawed observational studies. How do we get beyond that finding?
How do we get beyond that? Review? How do we get beyond that? That's a key
Yeah, but
question.
there are other studies, Michael, that show at an individual level for individual. When you're talking about
observational studies
on the epidemic or the pandemic as a whole, the data are less strong.
You are such a hack.
the idea that anybody listens to this idiot anymore, it's mind blowing. This guy should never, ever be able to show his face. He should never be able to show his face ever in public. He has been so thoroughly debunked as a complete sham artist. Like he should never be back. Stephen, do you remember that? Okay, so that what was it? It was that PDF chart, and it showed all of the studies based on like the strength of the studies, and what basically that study that chart, it showed that like that the all the studies that say that masks are effective are on the weaker side. They have no systematic reviews, no meta-analysis, which are the strongest levels of evidence. And on the other side, the sides that say masks are not effective or not helpful, like they had so many. Here, I'm gonna post a link in the chat for anybody who wants to see it. It's under the section "True or False." The majority of the best and most high quality studies report masks to prevent. There's a PDF chart there, and you can go take a look at it. I'm gonna post it in the chat. Basically, and this was like early on, early on in the pandemic, it was incredibly obvious that the mask studies, the strongest evidence was showing masks aren't working. And you still get people saying like, well, I saw a study somewhere that said that they do work. Yes, an observational small scale, not an RCT. That was Stephen's go-to argument for anybody who argues for masks. Show me a single RCT. Nobody could do it because they weren't they were in short supply. And even when they started coming out, any RCT study that actually studied masks came to the opposite conclusion. They basically concluded that no, these things are not working. And it's not that masks are useless totally. They're just not made for the task of stopping viruses. They're not. This was the scientific consensus before the COVID pandemic or plandemic. And then people suddenly, every scientific organization from the WHO, CDC to everyone else, they suddenly they suddenly had a breakthrough, a eureka moment, a magical light from the sky, and they're like, we've seen the light. Oh my goodness, masks are now beautifully perfect, and they're gonna save us all. And it's like, do you have any evidence for that? No, but we're smart and we have medical degrees, so we know what we're talking about. And so anyway, if anybody still believes this, it's on you, because the evidence is now there. There are mountains of data, mountains of studies. It's not defensible. And I'm sorry, Fauci should never, ever be used as a credible source of information ever. Like, he's a pathological liar. He should never be in public again. I'm shocked that they're putting him up there at all. Yeah. What a nut job. What a nutcase.
What a nutcase. All right. So from Daily Mail, just to continue on with finalizing all these COVID stuff, the BA.2.86 COVID strain is just another scariant. Global studies find variant is less contagious and deadly than previous versions. That's sort of... less contagious is interesting. Less deadly than is totally normal for any form of viral mutations.
Mm-hmm.
Fears spooked several colleges and businesses into bringing mask mandates, while health officials in New York encouraged people to don face coverings over Labor Day weekend, but early results from lab tests carried out in the U.S., United States, and Sweden. United States, Sweden, and China suggest that these warnings may everyone overblown, and this variant may actually have been another scariant and not the second coming of Omicron. Even if it was the second coming of Omicron, it's Omicron. Omicron was super weak. The antibodies from vaccinated... Yeah, that's why they keep getting it. Vaccinated people and those who had recovered from an infection within the last 6 months are just as effective against BA.2.86, enabling no sub-infection as they were with other variants. Yes, that's why those who are unvaccinated aren't getting any of these. Because natural immunity is way better than the type you get from any sort of this mRNA garbage.
Funny how that, for almost all of, medical history from, science, everyone knew, every single doctor and medical professional knew that natural immunity was always better. Suddenly, during the 3 years of COVID, we all suddenly forgot. It's suddenly all of medical science have flipped on its head, and magically we lived in an upside down world where natural immunity was no longer a thing. It was not legitimate anymore. It was like you could tell like the medical experts sold their souls, and it sold out. They basically sold out, and they were lying through their teeth to people and telling them lies, and they didn't care. That's the worst part. So yeah, there's a reason why we don't trust police. There's a reason why we don't trust medical experts. You have to like be very choosy and very skeptical of who you choose to listen to based on their record of being honest and intellectually, like, honest. There's a lot of people out there who are absolutely willing, and they were willing to lie in the past. They're willing to lie again. So you should be very skeptical of who you listen to for your medical, like information, I guess. Yeah.
My goodness.
I know, right?
Oh no, I'm just looking at Collusion's comments. Be like, no, what's best for children is following actual like reports. Masks are terrible for children.
Yeah,
they've
Steven,
always been terrible.
Do you want to list some of the harms that actually happen to children because of the mask mandates?
Oh.
Just give me some off the top of your head.
Top of my head.
We've covered these for the last 3 years.
Speech pathology issues.
Yes, children had they were unable to develop at the proper rate, so they had all sorts of mental health issues. You had all sorts
rates of bacterial and fungal infections in children.
Yes, all sorts of
adults,
immune issues because their immune system is not designed to wear a mask over your face for like hours, per day. Mask mandates also have like massive harm to children's educations. A lot of children did not recover from like all the damage from like mask mandates. Mask mandates were one of the most incredible examples of a complete abuse of medical trust.
Yeah,
and they cause they're not consequence free.
Well, and this is mask mandates where because of this idea that people were transmitting COVID-19 before experiencing symptoms, and Lancet study published, and this is an article from today. In a blow to the COVID-19 silent spreader narratives and used to push for universal masking, including controversially among school children, a recent study published in the Lancet suggests people who are non-symptomatic rarely have the ability to infect others, which is what we've been saying forever. Because we've been saying for ages that those who are non-symptomatic do not have enough viral load to spread it. Silent transmission is the idea that those who are infected with COVID-19 to show no symptoms can still spread the virus to other people. While all relevant studies show that pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic silent spreaders account for some proportion of infections, the degree of silent transmission is less clear. A number of early studies, in some cases affected by limitations that may have led to the proportion of pre-symptomatic transmission to be artificially inflated, and PCR testing, suggested that silent transmission accounted for about half of secondary infections or even more. That led them to argue that everyone should wear a mask at all time when out in public.
Yeah.
So now we know better. This is why we advocate and we have all these sources and we have all this data. Because when you know these things, when you can say these things off the top of your head and when you can cite the resource, then anyone that comes to you, whether it be somebody, a layman off the street or a public official, be like, oh, we're thinking to bring back mask mandates. We're thinking to bring back these lockdowns, these restrictions, these harmful policies that killed lots of people and that have permanently damaged the lives of millions of people across the world. And then you just say, no, this is why this is wrong. And everybody should know this. Like, this is why we started this podcast in the first place, was that people were blindly going along with the narrative. And we're like, no, the narrative is wrong.
Yeah,
what they're saying, what they're deceiving people with is wrong. And this is how you counter it. And this is the data. And I've had people come up to me and they're like, dude, like, I don't watch your show all the time, but in the early days of COVID, I watched it.
Yep.
And you showed me everything that was wrong with what they were doing.
Yep.
And how to argue and go against it in a way that made sense. Because that's what we do. We try and make you shrewd so you don't have to get into these screaming matches. So you can just say, no, this is why you're wrong. Like, this is the data as to why you're wrong.
It's because a lot of people don't have the time to do the research.
Yes.
I get it. People are busy. You have families, you have like a work, you have a million things to do. You don't have the time to sit down and do the research. One of the things Stephen and I basically took the time. Collusion. I encourage you, even if you don't believe and you don't agree with whatever evidence I provide, at least go to our website, theschrooters.com, look at the resources page. I spent like weeks developing, creating those pages because we have spent hours upon hours doing research, looking for studies, looking for videos, looking for all sorts of evidence that you should look at as part of your research, because research is difficult for most people to do. I tried to do a lot of the hard work. And so even if you don't like the evidence, even if you disagree with the views, I made entire pages on just masks. I made entire pages on the vaccines, entire pages on the what do you call PCR tests. Okay, and I've created resources for people to basically go, and there you go. Just go through, look at all the articles that I posted, and learn it for yourself. I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to go and look it up yourself. Fact check us and be like, hey, man, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that was the thing. I talked to one guy, one coworker who was convinced there is not a single study of any kind that says the mask didn't work. And I'm like, here's an article that shows you 170 at the time mask studies, all of which say masks do not prevent transmission of viruses, including COVID. And he was like, he had no idea what to do with that. He's like, what? I'm like, you told me they don't exist, that there's not a single study out there that says the masks don't work. I literally just showed you an article that basically says that there's a lot of studies. He's like, well, I'm going to have to look at them. I'm like, yes absolutely. Go look at them.
That.
But he basically didn't know. He had no idea that there was actually counter studies. Because he hears most of his information from like the sort that a lot of biased sources, including like Canadian media and a lot of these like, bought and sold like, medical authorities that are basically telling people lies, and they're banking on people's ignorance or their trust to basically not look into these things. So yeah, so the whole point of our show is we like to encourage you like to think critically, to not just believe everything you're told, including what we say, and also we try to find information to show you so that you can make better decisions and be better informed about what you're consuming. And of course, we love it when people show us things like, I didn't know that was the thing. Like Stephen, a couple of maybe it was like last year. Remember I looked into that whole theory about the snake venom. I thought that was like, wow, that actually sounds pretty crazy, and there was like a lot of legitimacy. But you and a couple of people showed me like a whole bunch of things that like, okay, like I think once I looked at it, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe there's a lot of problems with this theory, and I changed my mind. And that's the way it should be. If you're faced with evidence contrary to what you thought might be a legitimate theory, that's the way you should be. You should always test, you should always question, and you should never assume that you cannot be wrong. That's not the way to get to a better understanding of these kind of things. So yeah, we encourage you, look into things, definitely check the sources, definitely do some research. That's always good. CW fire. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, I'm just quickly looking up something. I'll be right with you in a second.
Oh, okay. You want me to continue my massive rant?
Please do. Now we can transition to the next story.
Yeah. Okay, so collusion. On your boomer Facebook page. Oh my gosh! Do you realize that we have an entire group called Northern Lights? I created a group where I share. Over 2-3 years now, I have shared news articles, studies, academic papers, all kind of things.
Hold on. Collusion. So, I just have a simple question. Do you value, like, I know that we had this long discussion about you not valuing the Word of God at all. Do you have any value for actually, like, preaching? Is it all about the wrath of God, or do you also preach anything? Do you talk about the love of God at all? Like, is everything that I've seen from you has been, oh, I hate everybody. That you're all deluded weirdos and you're all stupid and you're all dumb. but like nothing that you have said conveys that the God that you think you follow is loving. Everything that you have said is about how God is petty and vindictive. And I think part of that stems from the fact that you don't actually value Scripture. You don't value the Word of God because you value what you claim to have been given through personal revelation. And there's no challenge to that. There's no accountability for that. And I think that's part of why your words are filled with such anger and such resentment for other people. Like I don't hate you. I don't think that you're a lesser person. But yet everything that you have said wants to put everyone else down that believes in, if you go to church, if you believe in any sort of political ideology, even in a flighty fashion, even in a minimalist fashion, you'll call us imbeciles and idiots. I don't think that. I think that you have this belief. Okay.
Well, let me just address this one really quick, Stephen. So the comment is, you guys would rather, like, complain about politics and public service than lead anyone towards God. It's a bait and switch. So really quick, this is a political commentary show. That's what we do. This is why we actually post articles and talk about what's happening. It's like imagine somebody having a channel where they talk about fishing and they constantly put on like things about fishing. All you guys do is talk about fishing. Like, well, yeah, it's a fishing channel, and that's what we talk about. This is a political commentary show, kind of like Tim Cast IRL. That's what we do. So like, it's like, wait, we're talking about like politics? How dare we? It's like, well, we're a political show. Kind of our topic. It's what we talk about. Obviously, we're Christians, and we talk about it from a conservative Christian viewpoint. We do infuse Christian values, Christian morals, and Christian perspectives onto like, analyzing what we do. So our goal is not primarily like evangelistic. That's not what this channel is about. We're talking about politics. We are Christians, and so we do infuse some of our conversations with some Christian viewpoints. But yeah, if you believe that we're failing as like, Christian channel, I'm like, well, yeah, because we're not a Christian channel, we're a political commentary channel. There are many podcasts that I could recommend to you if you want to listen to primarily just Christian commentary on modern things and all that. So yeah. And no, I don't live in fear.
No.
No. I actually,
the show is entirely how we address fear.
Yes, actually, for the most part during COVID, we encourage people not to be afraid because the more information you have, the less afraid you were during COVID. People were scared of like COVID. And I'm like, well, actually, the more information you have about COVID, the less scared you'll be because information is power. So yeah, definitely encourage people not to live in fear. So
all right. Well, speaking of those who are not living in fear, let's talk about Tamara Lich. Trial of convoy protest organizers Tamara Lich, Chris Barber is underway. Trial of convoy protest organizers Tamara Lich and Chris Barber began this morning. Lich and Barber stand co-accused of mischief, obstructing police, counseling others to commit mischief, and intimidation for their roles in the weeks-long protest that gridlocked streets in downtown Ottawa and left residents dismayed by its presence through most of January and February 2022. Several of the charges... dismayed. This is, like, Calgary Herald is actually one of the more regular in its tone. Like the National Post, the National Post was like, this was an occupation, and then it was terrorizing the. Like, okay, well, you're clearly not trustworthy in your documentation.
You can tell if it's a tabloid if they use tabloid language. This is kind of like trying to.
This is trying to be objective, and I appreciate that about this from the Calgary Herald. So, as we all know, convoy happened in 2022. Tamara Lich is the organizer. Thankfully, when you talk to regular everyday Canadians, they're like, well, I'm not huge in favor of what the convoy did, but the government was equally wrong in what they did. I'm like, yeah, the government was exceptionally heavy-handed in how they dealt with the convoy.
But that's an understatement.
An understatement. And most people do realize, be like, yeah, this was a peaceful protest that the government took over. The government harangued and threw them out of Ottawa because they were a dissenting force.
It was one of the most, it was like the most incredible case of scapegoating I have ever seen in Canadian history. They turned one of the most peaceful, like I was incredibly proud.
Oh yeah, it was good.
That was one of the most incredible examples of how to do a protest right. Because these people were like in Ottawa, they were incredibly cooperative. They were incredibly, like when there was an injunction about haunting, they basically tried to abide by that. They cleaned up the streets. They fed people. They did everything right. And the Canadian government basically showed that they are basically tyrants. They couldn't help themselves. They abused a law that was never intended to address protests. The Emergency Act. They completely and totally abused that thing. Abused the thing afterwards to basically give themselves cover for like their own crimes. Like it's insane. It's insane. Like the Canadian government is an absolute disaster bomb. I think that was the turning point for the Trudeau Liberals. From that point on, the Trudeau Liberals have consistently and totally lost like support to the point where now they're basically looking at 2% chance of winning the next election.
Yeah, I saw that from Kean Bexley, and I was like, oh, well, that's good.
Yeah,
at least we'll see a marginal improvement. As much as as much as we know that the CPC is basically just kind of a center right party.
Did you hear, Stephen, that the CPC, if the election was held today, I think the CPC has a higher chance of getting a majority than a minority.
Ooh, okay.
Higher percentage.
That is actually pretty good. Yeah. Like I know that there's been so many issues in Canada under the Trudeau government, and the Canadian people have not done well. And we're just hoping for a return to some semblance of normality, and being able to live our lives without being kind of having the hand of government potentially trying to take away the things which we hold most dear. And like people talk about, I was listening to an interview. I was listening to, because I'm a Daily Wire subscriber, so I was listening to the conversation between Ben Shapiro and Vadi Bochum. And the Canadian people, they've been lulled into this kind of sense of self-satisfaction and complacency. And I've spoken about this lots, especially conservative Christians here in Canada. Conservative Christians here in Canada have been lulled into a complacency because they're like, oh, well, they'll just leave us alone if we leave them alone, and they're not going to do anything to us, and we don't have to worry. Like, we don't have to speak out about issues. And if we stay silent, and if we don't address it, and if we don't try and change politics, then they'll let us live our lives. And it's like, well, no, you're just going to suffer down the road, and then there'll be nothing that you can do about it. There'll be nothing that you can say, because everything will be, oh, yep, no, you gave us total control and authority. And it's like, yes, the end of days is approaching, but it's not here yet. And I do not want to see my fellow citizens suffer. I don't want to see my fellow Christians suffer. Nope, and the only way that we can prevent that from happening in any way, shape, or form is for people to be vocal. For people to be hiding in the street, for hiding in their churches, is only providing public assent and consent to all these things happening. If we actually speak up, if we have a significant voice, not only in public, but also in government, then these things will be a lot slower. I'm not saying they won't happen at all. We know, due to scripture, that they will happen. But as Christians, we should also try and promote love, and love means we don't want others to suffer. And that's why we actually have this show to talk about political issues. Because if people are informed, then when things happen to them, then they can be aware and they'll know the steps to take. They'll know how to address these things instead of just being like, I'm going to hide. Like, I get after my in-laws because they're like, oh no, we're going to run off to the hills and hide. If things get a little bit worse. And I'm like, that's not what we're called to do.
No, that's one of my favorite stories historically is during one of the biggest plagues that hit the Roman Empire was at the end of the 260 AD era. Most Romans were fleeing the cities, going to going to country, just getting out of the cities because that's where the plague was happening. Christians ran into the cities to care for the poor, and because of a basic care of their needs from like basic nursing, dealing with fevers and all that kind of stuff. Yes, a lot of Christians died, but they helped save like a lot of people, and they also helped gain immunity and turn the whole thing around. That was the model, I think, of like amazing Christians. This is that's how it should be. By the way, Stephen, I'm putting something on the chat on what do you call it? This is
the current polling. Yep.
Polling. This is the current polling. I don't know if you can pull it up on the screen.
Yeah, I can pull it up. Just give me a second.
Okay. So this is the polling from, when was it? Like September 3rd, 2023, which was 2 days ago. All right. The 338 Canada CPC majority 67%, CPC minority 31%. The Liberal Party Canada 2% chance of winning.
My goodness, that is good.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? So in Canada, we actually have good news when it comes to elections.
People are finally getting fed up.
Yes. The only bad news is that, unfortunately, the Liberal government basically has a stranglehold on our government, and they can hold on for another 2 years if they want to.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's good news. It means that
it is. At
least Trudeau does not look like he's going to get back into a majority government at all. Maybe not even a minority government. There's an end to the nightmare, basically. So we're hoping that actually leads to an actual good outcome in the future. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
before we move on to the last story, there's a difference between clearly established things that have worked. Like you talked about the polio vaccine. The polio vaccine took, 10, 15 years to get to market? Clearly reduced deaths.
Yes.
Having a surgery or an adjustment to fix a broken bone. That clearly works. This did not. This had 4 to 5 months.
It was rushed. The evidence was not
and
showing.
They covered up safety.
Yeah, they covered up safety. So they covered up safety concerns and safety signals. We
don't have there are people that are in the what the media tried to do is they tried to lump anybody that disagreed with the COVID vaccine as anti-vaxxers and opposed to all vaccines as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not on board with that. Other vaccines went through much more scrutiny. They went through much more rigorous testing. And yeah, the idea of vaccines is not something that's grandiose and new. This is something that's been around for decades. And other vaccines were better tested. I'm just saying that there is a serious issue with how the medical system went about this one and the clear for-profit motive that both the government and Big Pharma had when it came to this. They made billions, tens of billions.
Not only that, but they also wasted enormous amounts of vaccines that expired because they bought too many. I mean, that government has no idea how to spend money. It's basically just put it on the credit card. That's their solution to everything. It's ridiculous.
Okay, no. Collusion, no. He clearly said he wasn't talking about the polio vaccine. So that is straw manning. So we're not going to do that.
Yep.
Do not strawman one of our fans on the show because we will call you out. But let's get into the final story because we're already over 2 hours.
Yeah, come on.
So, updated. So this is local news from Calgary. Charges pending after violent conflicts with 150 people erupts in Calgary on Saturday. Calgary Police Service considers this to be a serious event and has dedicated resources to keep the peace. This is not a protest. It is a violent conflict between two groups with opposing views.
Yeah.
So it said Sunday that charges are pending as a result of the incident. We sent 10 people to hospital, none with serious injuries, thankfully. They were called to the scene around 5 p.m. Saturday and told two groups of people were engaged in violent activity. When they arrived, they separated the groups and worked to de-escalate. Many of those involved were brandishing weapons. A video of the scene posted online showed men with bats and sticks. Others said there was also Molotov cocktails. Investigation is ongoing in which police are looking at property damage, the violence involved, and all relevant associated criminal activity. Police asked people to stay away from Falcon Ridge as they investigated Saturday night. Our primary goal is to ensure public safety. And of course, I was camping with my in-laws, and some of my in-laws live right next to Falcon Ridge, so they were getting like texts from their neighbors being like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on?" And so we were hearing about it while we were camping.
So the whole thing was like about the Eritrean.
As far as we know, it seems likely that it is about the Eritrean conflict.
What's good? So can you give me a quick?
Okay, so by most accounts, the Eritrean government is one of the most oppressive in Africa.
Okay,
and they have equally vehement supporters and equally vehement those that oppose them, and the conflict has been going on and spreading throughout kind of the Western world. We've seen conflicts like this spread up in Europe and in the United States, and now, of course, it's happening in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So there are issues, and I don't want to say this is entirely linked to how Canada does immigration, but this is not a good sign for how Canada does immigration.
This is an interesting thing because, like, this sounds like, you know, the kind of, okay, so like, you know how like there's Palestinian versus like Israeli protests, right? Like, you know, like Palestinians protest something that is so good, and then, you know, like there's clashes about that. Sometimes there's like, you know, Hong Kong protests and like you know, like there'll be clashes about that. This is one that I haven't heard of. Like, I didn't actually know about the Eritrean thing, but it's interesting that you have pro-government supporters and then anti-government protesters, and that's kind of like what's launching. It's interesting. It's almost like a community that's fighting itself. Something that's not like most Canadians wouldn't know about. I bet you anything. If I was like, if you asked me, if you told me like this was an Eritrean protest, I'd be like, I had no idea what that is, and I didn't actually know that there was like opposing groups and all that. But it's interesting because it shows you that these are the kind of things that pop up when you have enormous amounts of like uncontrolled immigration into a country. You're suddenly having to deal with things that you don't understand, right?
Oh man, Leroy, that was a great comment. We should all have shakshuka and learn about Eritrea one day. Yes, we will have a special. It'll be like shakshuka time with the shrewd dudes.
That's right. Yeah, we're gonna make some... Oh my gosh.
Leroy, you have been great for commentary.
Well done, Leroy. Well done. It was a great job.
Yeah. No, and like we were having this discussion in the campsite, and how the Canadian government does, so for those who aren't aware, the way the Canadian, the American governments do immigration is very different. Canada does a system of, it's not the melting pot, it's the...
Oh, we do multiculturalism.
Yes, multiculturalism. And the United States does the melting pot. So multiculturalism is everybody living in the same area, but you do not have one distinct identity. Whereas in the United States, the melting pot is everybody comes in and you bring your elements from your culture, but then you assimilate and you melt into American culture. And so that you are primarily American, you're not primarily the culture in which you came from. And so people don't call them, like, people who come to Canada, they're like, well, I'm Chinese. It's like, wouldn't you say you're Chinese Canadian? No, I'm just Chinese. Whereas the goal of the United States is, oh, I'm American first, but I have this heritage. And because we do not force assimilation because we do not force people to acclimate to Canadian culture, we have these districts, we have these areas that eventually, if things actually continue to get worse, we will have regions in which certain peoples cannot go into. Like we had during 2013, one of the first political protests that I ever went to, we had a Palestinian protest.
Yes,
and Israelis showed up across the road. There were 5 Israelis pro-Israelis that showed up across the road, and the Palestinians went across the road and in full view of the police, beat them, some to within an inch of their life. Yeah, Sharia law zones. This is what the idea of multiculturalism advocates for. And it's
actually, they're not called Sharia law zones. They're called no-go zones.
Yeah, they're well, yeah, especially in Sweden. In Sweden, the police don't even go in there.
Australia too. I saw a video of somebody going to Australia. They couldn't go into certain areas.
Yeah. Because this is the end result of multiculturalism. You have areas that are run by the culture in that region. Now, of course, the United States had that for a little bit with the Chaz, but that was basically just due to the improper function of law and order in Portland, because the mayor couldn't or wouldn't take a stance and had lacked the balls to actually properly respond to it. So that's not an issue with the American system of immigration. That's more of just you didn't want to take a proper action of... Yeah, you have to wonder why a nice country like Sweden is the rape capital of Europe.
I don't know. The UK and Germany.
They're keeping up with them. I remember the video from what was it, Munich?
Yeah, Munich. So Munich, they had. And this is like not just Munich. There was like several places. Women were being raped in gang rapes. In festivals in Germany. Where they like an individual woman, German woman, was basically swarmed and surrounded by, I think it was like 30, 40 guys that would basically create a ring around them. And then the guys in the middle would rape them.
Yep.
It was insane. I never heard that before, but I was like, wow, that is nuts. And then the German government is like, well, it's racist to try to suggest that this was like racially motivated. Like, it was racially done.
Yeah.
Give me a break, you lunatics. The other one was the UK. Remember the UK? Where they had literally a child prostitution ring. I think it was like 1,200 or something, like insane numbers of like underage.
What was that guy's name? The reporter.
Tommy something. Tommy.
What's his name?
I know who you're talking about. He tried to expose it, but that went on for years because the police were like, well, we can't look into it because we're afraid of being accused of racism. Oh, good. So like 1,200, like underage girls were basically like sexually abused because you guys are too scared of racism. Good job, people. Good job.
Yeah, I think it was Tommy Robinson.
I think so, yeah.
No,
that guy was brave, incredibly brave. Wow,
yes, I appreciated what he did.
Oh man!
So thank you, Leroy, for bringing that up. So yeah. Anyways, so we're at 2 hours and 15 minutes. This is one of the longer episodes we've done, so we should probably start to kind of wind things down. But we thank you everybody for participating in the chat. It has been exceptionally lively. And this is what we want. We want to have a back and forth. We want to have a discussion. That's part of the reason why I started having the chat, so that people can see the discussion that we have on the show. Well, thank you. You are appreciated. Jason Kong. Grammar police. Yeah, so... for those who are following the show, we do a live stream every Tuesday and Thursday. We try and start around 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And then, of course, once a month at the end of the month, we do an open mic where everybody can join and kind of talk about whatever they want to talk about. So if you want to find out our other videos, you can check us out on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. You can also check us out on our text platforms at Facebook, Gitter, and Twitter. And, of course, on our website at theshrewddudes.com.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can check out all our stuff in all those things. But, of course, always remember to follow and subscribe, because that will get more engagement and we can have more interesting discussion, especially with those who disagree. We definitely do not want to have an echo chamber.
No, none of that.
So, here at the Shrewd Dudes podcast, we like to remind you, why be rude when you can be shrewd? Have a great night, everybody. We will see you on Thursday. Until then, have a great night. And as always, God bless.
Good night, everybody.